I'm Tim and I'm from the Scrap Line, often found on YouTube. As you can see today, I'm in Richard from New Junction's loft, who's kindly invited me over to do a weathering project on this Dapol Class 29. So what I'm going to do is go through the processes and show you exactly how I go about weathering this to give it a worn, run-down appearance. So okay, before we get any weathering on this, first thing I want to do is just mask up all the windows, and my aim on the front as well is to try and create the windscreen wiper marks. So I'm using Humbrol Maskell, simple product. Again, you just brush this on, you leave it to dry. Once you finish the weathering, all that can be simply peeled away. So with the front, what I'm doing is just creating the windscreen wiper marks where the wipers would normally clean all the dirt off. So with this, just creating that sort of arched effect and keeping some of the actual glass unprotected, so once all the weathering effects are applied, you'll end up with the windscreen wipers making it look like they've cleaned the windows. Okay, so what we're going to do now is move on to the next stages of this. All the Maskell's now dry, and I'm a fan of Vallejo paint, so I'm going to be using the Vallejo's light sea blue and white. So first things first, I'm going to just apply a very small amount of the blue into the airbrush. Just testing the airbrush on the piece of paper. And in a top-down fashion, straight over the top of the roof. And you want to do it on an angle so you create that effect that it's creating streaks. So what I do now is going to start toning down the blue. So we're going to add a few drops of white into the airbrush cup, and then stir that blue through, and that will give me an even lighter shade. Okay, so my reason for using the Vallejo paints, they're quick drying, so being an acrylic paint, there's no fumes, so you don't need to wear a mask, so the need for extraction is not necessary. Right, okay, so again, about another 30 minutes has passed just to allow for the blue to dry. Any overspray that you do get on the yellow areas, not to worry too much. I did clean some areas off, but further weatherings will disguise any overspray. What I'm going to do now is go into Rust It. This is a product from Town and Country Scenics. It's an acrylic paint, it's textured, and it obviously comes in two colours, so you get the very dark brown with a very slight hint of red, and obviously the zingy orange colour. As always with rust, it's best just to have a variation of different tones, so not just to stick with one colour. So what we're going to do is focus on areas around the front, which we've typically seen a lot of battered, chipped areas, and some along the roof, and just in various places along the body side. So the paints themselves, they're quite thick. As they are textured, it's always best to not over apply this, otherwise you'll apply too much of a texture which will be out of scale for obviously 00 gauge. Okay, so I'm just using a pretty worn out brush, something that's quite stiff, and again, just remove as much from the brush as you can, and just locating various places where you'll end up with a few chips. Okay, so now we've got all the rust on. This has now been left to dry for about 30 minutes. Next stage is to completely cover the model in a acrylic varnish. I use Humberol products, and this is the satin varnish. Got to use an acrylic on this one, as when I progress on with the weather and effects and I start doing the removal process, which will be shown, the acrylic varnish acts as a barrier to prevent me from damaging any of the paints that have been applied so far. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the model outside, as we're in an enclosed loft, and give this whole thing a coat over. Right, okay, so next stage on this is to start applying all the filth and grime. The model itself is had its satin varnish and is now completely dry. Now I'm using up to four colours from the Rail Match range. They vary from roof dirt, weather black, brake dust, and frame dirt. So the first colour I'm using is the roof dirt colour, and I'm just going to apply a very small amount of that to the airbrush. As I'm not using a lot of this, you only want a very small amount. And the same again with the blue, is done as a top-down fashion. Okay, so in the airbrush now, I've got the frame dirt colour. What I'm going to do is just concentrate on the body sides and just getting some of the grime on those. Okay, so now I've got weather black in the airbrush, and I'm just going to focus mainly on where all the vents are, just to vary the tones a little bit. So going to be using the thinners, and the reason I put the acrylic satin varnish on first was just to protect the first layers of paint that I applied at the beginning. As this enamel thinness is quite harsh, if I didn't have that satin varnish on, it would strip back through beyond where I want it to go. So just going to use a nice flat brush and working it into the thinners, removing the excess off onto a piece of tissue paper, and then we're just going to strip back down through the layers of paint that we applied. And along the body sides, we just repeat the process again, using flat brush, working our way along just removing the weathering, pushing it down and creating general streaks. So we've worked our way through the model and removed a lot of the weathering that was applied first time around, and as you can see there's some nice streaking effects going on there, and we've got some areas back down to the blue colour. What we're going to do now is we're going to hit the underframes, so I'm going to apply some of the brake dust just around the obvious areas where you'll get some brake dust build up. Okay, to finish the model off, what we're going to do is bring it all together, and with that I'm using the Weather Black. Starting with the roof, we're just going to work around the areas where the exhaust ports are and the extraction fan as well. And then on all of the underframes again, just a quick pass over just to bring it all together. So there we go, there's the finished item. Nothing difficult at all, and just simply used basic paints, nice medium priced airbrush. You can probably get away with some fairly cheaper ones. So if you want to check out more of this, pop over to my own channel, and I'm sure the link for that will be down in the video description.